When the greedy elders of Umuahia village threw this pregnant, crying widow into the dirt and locked her out of her own home, they thought they had sealed her fate. They called her cursed and told her she would die a beggar. But exactly 20 years later, a roaring convoy of luxury SUVs tore through that same village, stopping right in front of the gate she was kicked out of. The boy they chased away had returned as a billionaire. But just as he stepped out to embrace his crying mother, she didn't smile. Instead, she let out a blood-curdling scream. "Stop! If your feet touch that dirt, we lose everything!" What dark, terrifying secret did this widow hide for 20 years? Watch until the very end, because the twist will leave you completely speechless. The entire village of Umuaha fell into a haunting silence. Children stopped chasing one another through the dusty paths. Market women abandoned their baskets of tomatoes and peppers, letting them roll into the dirt. Even the elders, who usually sat in rigid dignity beneath the ancient Iroko tree, slowly rose to their feet. A convoy of gleaming black SUVs rolled into the village, sending thick clouds of red dust swirling into the afternoon sky. No one had ever seen so many expensive vehicles in one place. Villagers rushed from every direction, whispering among themselves in utter disbelief. Who could this be? Is it the governor? A foreign investor coming to buy our land? Then, the lead vehicle came to a gentle stop right in front of the old, rusted gates of a family compound. The heavy rear door opened. A tall, well-dressed young man stepped out. He wore a crisp white caftan and polished black shoes that mirrored the sun. His luxury wristwatch sparkled, but it wasn't his immense wealth that stunned the gathering crowd. It was his face. One elderly woman covered her mouth, her eyes widening. "It can't be." Another whispered with trembling lips, "That's Eneka's son." A shocking murmur swept through the crowd like wildfire. The widow's child? The boy they chased away into the forest? The child the elders called cursed? Inside a small, decaying mud house across the road, an elderly woman heard the massive commotion. Her hands shook violently as she pushed herself up. Years of brutal hardship had bent her back, and silver hair framed her deeply tired face. When she stepped outside and saw the magnificent convoy, tears immediately filled her eyes. "Chidi," she whispered. She had prayed that name every single day for 20 years. The young man smiled the moment he caught sight of her. He stretched out his arms wide. "Mother!" The villagers smiled, expecting an emotional, tearful reunion. But instead, Eneka screamed with every ounce of strength left in her frail body. "Don't move!" Her voice echoed across the entire compound, sharp and terrifying. "Chidi, don't let your feet touch this ground!" The crowd froze. Confusion spread across Chidi's face. He looked down at the plush red carpet his security guards had hastily rolled out, stretching from his vehicle to the entrance of the compound. Everything seemed perfect. Why was his mother terrified? Why was she crying in horror instead of celebrating his glorious return? A gentle wind suddenly swept through the village, turning violently cold. The leaves of the old Iroko tree rustled fiercely. Far away, beyond the deep forest, thunder rumbled, although the sky above remained completely clear. Nika's heart pounded against her chest. She had heard that exact supernatural thunder before, 20 years earlier, on the night she made the greatest, most dangerous choice of her life. Because long before the expensive cars, long before the tailored clothes, long before anyone called her son a billionaire, there was only hunger, loneliness, and a broken widow the entire village wanted to forget. Before we reveal the terrifying secret Eneka was hiding, take a quick second to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We bring you the most gripping, emotional stories every single week, and you won't want to miss what happens next. 20 years earlier, life had never been easy for Nneka. Yet everyone who knew her agreed on one thing. She possessed the kindest heart in Umuahia. She greeted everyone with deep respect, shared her meager food whenever she had a little extra, and cared for sick neighbors without ever expecting a dime. Most importantly, she loved her husband, Obina, with every beat of her heart. Obina was not a rich man. His farm was small. His roof leaked every rainy season, and some harvests barely lasted until the next planting. Still, laughter always filled their little home. They believed that as long as they had each other, tomorrow would bring hope. But a dark sorrow refused to leave them. Children. Their first baby lived only 6 days. The second died before taking his very first breath. The third survived for 3 months before a strange, unexplainable fever swept through the village. Each tiny burial stole another piece of Nneka's soul. Yet, she never blamed God. She simply prayed harder. One evening, as they watched the sunset, Obina gently held her hand. "My wife," he said, "if the whole world turns against you, remember this. You have never been my shame. You are my greatest blessing." Tears filled her eyes. "But your brothers hate me, Obina. They think I brought bad luck into this family." Obina sighed heavily. "They love land more than blood. Never fear them. As long as I breathe, no one will ever touch you." Neither of them knew those words would be his final promise. Just weeks later, Obina felt terribly ill. At first, they thought it was ordinary malaria, but his body grew weaker by the day. Traditional herbs failed. The village healer shook his head in pity. Nneka stayed beside him every second. She sold her beautiful wedding wrappers to buy medicine. She sold her cooking pots. She even sold the small goats her mother had given her. Nothing worked. One cold morning, Obina reached for her trembling hand. His breathing was shallow. "Nneka, promise me, no matter what happens, keep living." "Don't leave me," she sobbed. He smiled weakly. "I'll always be with you." Moments later, his hand slipped from hers. The room became painfully quiet. Nneka's agonizing cry echoed across the village. By sunset, she was a widow. The funeral drew everyone. People spoke kindly and comforted her. But beneath those sympathetic faces, absolute greed was brewing. Obina's elder brother, Azuka, watched silently as the mourners departed. His wicked eyes lingered not on the grave, but on the prime farmland stretching behind the house. Late that night, Azuka gathered his younger brothers. "There is no reason for that barren woman to remain here. This land belongs to our blood." One brother hesitated, but Obina loved her deeply. Azuka slammed his fist on the wooden table. "She gave him no surviving child. Our brother's name ends with him. Tomorrow morning, we reclaim everything." At sunrise, as Nneka was weakly sweeping the compound, Azuka marched through the gate with his brothers and several young men carrying empty baskets. Nneka frowned, wiping her swollen eyes. "What is happening?" Azuka answered with ice in his voice. "You no longer belong here. Pack your things and leave." "What do you mean?" Nneka gasped. "This is my husband's home." "It was," Azuka sneered. "Now it belongs to us." Before she could even scream, the men rushed into her home. They threw out her sleeping mats, her clay pots, her clothes, and her cooking utensils. They even tossed out the wooden stool Obina had lovingly carved with his own hands. Everything was thrown onto the dusty main road like garbage. "No, please stop," Nneka cried, trying to shield her things.